Well, comrades, good morning. That's 10 o'clock morning, Saturday. The time is ripe to speak about cyber threat intelligence, what it is, where it comes from, and what are the modern combat models that we can use in practice in our infrastructures. We have the same definition of the threat intelligence. This is the analyzed information about the adversaries, about their capabilities, capacities, intentions, and any groupings that are capable of doing some cyber operations. Let me introduce myself. My name is Nikita Nazarov. At the moment, I'm head of threat exploration in Kaspersky Lab. I'm responsible for the threat intelligence part of the SOC and EDR. And in my free time, I'm doing some research of different threat intelligence, threat hunting, etc. Before, I was head of SOC analytics group in Informzashita, and I joined Kaspersky as a TI head. Let's start from the very beginning, and that's about the cyber kill chain. We'll speak about where it comes from. That's an American military model. We'll speak about intelligence drive and defense, about MITRE attack. We'll speak about the pain pyramid of David Bianca, what threat landscape is about, and we'll proceed with the practical part with our combat models. First of all, this is based on the intelligence-driven incident response. We'll speak about different intelligence cycles, TI cycles, incident response cycles. Certainly, we'll speak about some practical cases. So we will analyze some incident response case. Let's start with a citation from Sun Tzu, The Art of War, what TI aims at with cyber intelligence. So this is a kind of a cyber intelligence. This is what community speaks about, but it actually aims at discovering the enemy as you discover yourself. Sun Tzu promoted the following ideology: if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you will win in every battle. But if you do not know yourself, but you know your enemy, then the success would be 50-50. But you do not know either yourself or the enemy, that would be total failure, epic failure. That's a quite ancient citation, and guys from Lockheed Martin probably proceeded from that, because in 2011 Lockheed Martin offers for the community the so-called cyber kill chain. Why actually they offered that concept? Because they were first advanced persistence threats emerged, the things which cannot be detected by ordinary security means, and people do not know what to do about them. There were some standards, there were some ISOs, but again, the defense industries in the United States were hacked, and the hackers there were very advanced, and so they started exploring who the evil-minded people are about, who the criminals are, and they developed a model which shows, in essence, what the cyber kill chain is about. So they took the 7 simplest stages from the reconnaissance, then an attack, then installation, then connection to the server, and reaching the goal. And this way they showed that actually the enemy had to go through certain stages in order to achieve something. They proceeded from a military doctrine as far as Lockheed Martin is a defense industry. Then the people from there were former officers of the Air Force intelligence. So there is a model of F2T2EA. That's the following concept. In 1996, Admiral Fulgen said that in the 21st century, if the pilot follows those 6 principles: find, fix, target, track, engage, and assess. So detect the range, transmit power, track the target and launch the missile, actually, then any target could be hit, and suddenly they had the velocity of the missile, the velocity of the aircraft, etc., etc. They used very complex formula, and still they are using that model. It is still operational in the United States Air Force, and they extrapolated on the cyber front. Actually, we have 5 such fronts. So cyber, land, air, space, etc. And cyber warfare is considered as the 5th front. So the time lapse, but they didn't have any answers. So the ill-minded, the criminals, go from A to B, and how to interrupt that, how to intercept them. And so they came up with intelligence-driven defense in 2012. That's an enormous document. And this is very much commendable to read it. It provided the very first definition of attack, how to fight that, how to combat that. And they said that we have a cyber kill chain, and we have all these 7 phases, and vertically and horizontally you can see all of them. Certain stages how to reject that attack, and certain hardware which you can use. So the certain stages they have to be taken, and for instance you can use the EPP, you can actually use other means, firewall for instance, and get protected, but the companies would buy from the vendors different solutions, would connect that to the network, the solutions would work, would send an alert, but you cannot get into that black box to see what actually is been written in that black box. And if you trust the vendor who says that this is bad, but he doesn't explain why this is bad, there is no description, and there are criminals, there are malicious guys who would hack it. So time lapsed, and apart from Lockheed Martin, there was another corporation in the market, which was called MITRE. MITRE provides support for the defense industry, and they followed the same concept of intelligence-driven defense, but they could not actually replicate that because it was patented, but they liked the ideology very much. And they developed their own model, which was called intelligence-driven defense. I apologize, it was called threat defense. And they decided actually to offer that to the community, so they took advantage of the concept that you have to get TI from the rest of the world. If you want to go faster, you actually have to go alone, but if you go far, you have to go together. So in 2013, the very first version of MicroAttack was offered to the community. That's the biggest database of knowledge about different threats and attacks as of today. And it is very popular all over the world. It's quite popular in Russia as well. But there are lots of nuances pertinent to that. Once you open that, it looks like that, so there are lots of attacks, lots of threats. Quite recently, the version 13 was published, and as of today, that's about 14 different tactics, and about 23 companies been incorporated, about 80 types of software, and 500 actors. That's a huge knowledge database, and you have to learn how to work with that. So how it all works. We have different techniques. So that's about a description of certain attack, how it's been implemented, how malicious guys can attack you. And so that's a technique, and there are sub-techniques there as well. There is a description, a brief description how it's been done, its number assigned to that, certain sub-techniques, certain tactics that it pursues. And there might be up to 3 to 4 different tactics, platforms that can be used for that, and the rights that are required for the attack, and who contributed that, because any person in the world actually can contribute to that database, the version, and when it was amended. Also, they provide knowledge as to what happened in the world in terms of that technique, different case examples, for instance. So some IT groupings, its name assigned to that, and some report that would published in the world, for instance, in 2000 something. You can click the link and read what is written there, and that would be great. So also they offer some mitigations. So these are the means to mitigate the attack before it's been implemented. For instance, if there is a vulnerability in the domain, you can refer to that mitigation recommendations. And a lot of references there is how. And you look at that, it looks nice, very cool. But, well, for instance, an analyst would actually embark on the CM system. And for instance, I'm a bank in Egypt. A bank in Egypt and for instance, I'm in the MET region, I'm doing finances, and my commander or my chief says, can you close all the threats that are there? And so he would up on Metro, and there are lots of techniques there. And that's very difficult to cover all 400 techniques, and there are procedures there as well, and there are many more procedures. For instance, one actually technique would involve about 50 different compliance rules, and TI came up with a threat landscape notion. You have to understand who you are in that threat landscape, or the Americans call that a battlefield. You would ask questions. Who are we? I'm a bank. Where I am? I'm in Egypt. What infrastructure I have? Windows, Macintosh, or Linux? What groupings are attacking our sphere? What actually groupings are attacking the MET region? What groupings may be interested in me? Do they want to steal my money from the service, or they want to encrypt everything and then extort money from me? And then you actually come up with a model pertinent to that criminal where you are on this battlefield. And meter attack acts very well, so it provides the data about the grouping. It would actually describe its allies, because there are now single names assigned to the allies. And for instance, I may call that grouping APT something, and a guy in Egypt may call that APT blah blah blah. And also there are certain techniques pertinent to the actors, and even you can do some attribution in terms of techniques. You can define who your aggressor is. For instance, if there is some military attack against certain pieces of infrastructure, you can do some attribution there as well. That's very convenient when you know your enemy, your mascot. For instance, they have certain stages to go, and for instance, if you can attribute to a certain actor, you can predict actually what other stages are there. For instance, there would be some groupings would hack certain banks, not in Egypt, but in Algeria, in the same region. And that set of knowledge would help you to respond to that incident. And you have to realize one more thing, how to detect that. In the community, and we spoke a lot about the pyramid of pain. There are 7 stages. There are 6. Apologize, which would follow the following concept. So why we call that the pyramid of pain, why we speak about the pain, and the answer would be different. But the concept lies in the fact that actually, what is your appetite for the pain? So hash, you have to detect the hashes, and you rewrite 3 lines in the code, and the hash will change. IP addresses, the command service again. There's an attack, so they attacked you, and they will change IP address and then change the IP address. Domain names, then network host artifacts, they would leave the traces of some utilities, and again they would change that. And for instance, you may dump Alsace process, you can indicate very good utilities, not in the dump format, but you can indicate any other format, and it would not set an alarm. Then tools, you can target that. You can now dump libraries, registry keys, command lines, but it might be state-supported, state-sponsored groupings, which may actually have a lot of budget, and you will never understand that this is Mimikatz. And we have TTPS. This is the latest stage, when it is very painful for the aggressor. For instance, if we look at SAS, it is in the same place. And for instance, some illegitimate process referring to that, were an illegal process that would send an alert in Windows. and you can start detecting something there. And TTPS, actually, this is the top level when you may detect the criminal very well. And applying these principles will help you to find your place in this threat landscape. So I'm a bank in Egypt, and this is my perimeter, this is my infrastructure, so my enemies are the following. I'm opting for the following techniques which are pertinent to the banks in Egypt. So I did my intelligence, get prepared for that attack. So there are a lot of enthusiasts who are writing reports that would be published by different NGOs. I will not name these organizations, but they're numerous in the world. You would open a report and it would describe the techniques, the procedures, what guys are there who are doing these procedures. And probably they would offer Sigma or Surikites or Yara. But that actually, the ready-made intel they can take advantage of. And so you take that and put that in the incident response. And that's very convenient, actually, to close certain gaps in your infrastructure, in your system, once you did the intelligence of the landscape. But there are lots of concepts. TI, that's a big thing. For instance, in Russia, there is a big problem when you speak about TI. Guys usually would say that this is about a compromising indicator, and I have a lot of pain when I hear that. But there is one book. A book that I started my career with. It's called Intelligence-Driven Incident Response, written by Rebecca Brown and Scott Roberts. They are using the following citation. TI is the glue that can bind together multiple diverse teams operating at different levels with different priorities. So it may include SOC, threat hunting, and guys from RIM, so everyone is around you. And they offer 3 levels of threat intelligence, and you can download that from the internet, but there is no clear-cut description what 3 levels are there. And so I decided to translate that into Russian in order to make it clear for the community what it is about, because it can be described differently. So the tactical level, that's the simplest one. So we have, again, tactical, operational, and strategic levels. So tactical level, these are the feeds, the low-level information that becomes obsolete very fast. The main consumers are CM, some SOAR, IDS, IPS, and other indicators. Usually, that's an information which becomes invalid very fast, except for hash. Operational level, that's the most sophisticated level. That level would include more detailed data about the company, about the enemy, something that would help you to respond to the incident when you act all together. Usually the consumers would be some specialist, that would be the third line of SOC, DFIR analyst, and incident response analyst. And the strategic level, this is a kind simple top level, which is responsible for the information which is provided for the top management, so that they could take certain decisions. It might be some executive reports about the threat landscape. For instance, there are 12 banks in Egypt and 6 of them are hacked. And if you do not buy anything, if you do not hire more people than a theory, you would be hacked too. And the management has to take a decision whether to buy anything or not to buy. These levels, again, were replicated from the military. That's the special forces of the United States, something that was extrapolated on the 5th front, on the cyber front. Well, community usually asks questions about the operational level. So there is another concept which is described in that book, intelligence-driven incident response. That's the most valid, most efficient approach in the world to addressing cyber threat intelligence. And DFIR commands. And there are 3 concepts there. described. The first one is that intelligence is the glue that can bind together multiple diverse teams. Then you have to understand two cycles. The first cycle, that's the intelligence cycle and the incident response cycle. And the third thing is any getting knowledge should generate other knowledge. And the incident response works together with cyber threat intelligence. When you have an aggressive approach to overwhelming the enemy based on the analysis of the infrastructure. So let's analyze the cycles. So I use SAS cycles, intelligence cycle. That's quite simple. And they have been discussed by the community. We have directions, so that's actually what we are looking for, or reconnaissance intelligence. Then it is followed by collection, when you collect the data from somewhere, then processing. That's the most boring process. When you do indexation, prioritization, filtering, then you analyze that. Then it's been rendered to the consumer, then you get a feedback. If it is okay, then the cycle is full. If not, then the cycle starts anew. And how RFI works, it works the same way. So we have a consumer, so you follow the stages of the cycle. So if everything is good, then we go down. If it is bad, then a new RFI, and we have to collect new intelligence. Incident response cycle, it looks more sophisticated. We have the cycle of a stage of preparation, SLC analysts who are preparing their tools, who are preparing for repelling the attack. Then it is followed by detection, when you detect your enemy within the infrastructure. Once you have detected the enemy, you start your response work. So this is not about overwhelming the enemy. This is not about that. This is when you're making obstacles to them. It is also called a containment. Then it is called eradication. So at the level of eradication, this is when you overwhelm your enemy. Then recovery or remediation. Then the conclusions or lessons learned. And another cycle. So you get prepared, you identify, you do containment, you eradicate, you do recovery, you learn your lessons, and a new cycle starts. We get prepared for another attack. But why? TIE has to work along with the incident response. Why this concept was proposed? The main concept is about the speed at which you can react to the incident, how fast you can detect who is your enemy in the infrastructure, and how fast you can overwhelm the enemy, so where they actually got positioned, how they managed to penetrate into infrastructure through some machine, virtual machine, or through a person. But the problem is that everyone is used to certain kinds of attacks, to certain kind of response. Charles von Clausewitz said that do not fight too long against one enemy, because he would adapt for your tactics. And actually, you should not actually overwhelm the enemy the same way, because the enemy may change his tactics in the course of that battle. And there is another concept which is called track zone. This is actually strike zone, so this is when we have to act in order to overwhelm the enemy. So it might be too early or too late. Too early is when an alert actually was resonated and you do not know what actually had. You don't have enough telemetry, you do not have enough intel, and you stunt your response, and the enemy actually can somehow hide and start encryption, ciphering, etc. And the incidents would repeat in a couple of weeks. So when the response starts too early, then the enemy would come back in a month's time. Too late. This is the opposite situation, when you procrastinate, when IT do not support you and you do not know who is responsible for this or that server, and so the enemy takes control over your server, and that's it. So they have golden ticket, and that's it. If your infrastructure is more than 5,000 machines, most likely you will lose lots of them. And there is a strike zone. Strike zone, this is the biggest place. where you work promptly along with cyber threat intelligence when you understand who your enemy is, judging by their techniques, and probably you could do some attribution. You know where actually what they hacked and where they actually what they got hold of, and collecting all the artifacts. When you know where actually they hacked the infrastructure, who your enemy is, this is when you can start acting. You can, for instance, suspend the internet apart from the business processes and start eradicating the enemy and then recover. But what will happen if you do not take these measures? So this is the upper cycle. So in the upper part you have incident response, and below you see TI. For instance, I don't have a pointer, but we got prepared for quite a while, and we suffer an attack. So it was detected. That's great. And we were to send a request to TI. So there were certain indicators. There was some AP, where some hash. There had to be something in the hash response. They did not request that, and we did not render the intelligence. So we go to the stage 4, and so response starts. And they do not yet understand what is going on, but they start a response. And this is very ungrateful thing, because you can actually come up with a situation when the enemy would come back again. And it's very difficult to follow these cycles. And the most efficient model which brings together all these cycles, this is F3EAD. That's the most powerful, the most efficient model in the world as of today. It proposes the following concept: the upper 3 cycles, find, fix, finish. So that is pertinent to incident response and exploit, analyze, and disseminate. This is about the cyber threat intelligence. So what we do, that's the most aggressive approach to overwhelming the enemy. When the data would be communicated to different departments all the time. So the enemy attacks our infrastructure and we get the first alert. The incident response SOC team, anyone who does that, does the defense, would render the data right to TI, and TI would support that on the fly, and would actually they would take IP and all the connections. Then you use the sandbox. Then you take hash and make your attribution, and for instance you may understand what the grouping is attacking you, and you provide that data to the incident response. And so let us look at certain practical cases, because when you look at these schemes you would have a lot of questions as to how it all works. Let's imagine the following infrastructure. That's very simple. An average one, for instance. We have internet, and we do not disconnect it. We have some firewall, CIEM, certainly, and we have the main infrastructure, certain department, there is a server, and there are some guys who are sitting somewhere in the city of Lipetsk. So they also are using the same infrastructure in order to get into that network, but they're sitting in the city of Lipetsk. It could be monitored very well. So we are at the stage of finding, so the people are just waiting for what is going to happen. In the morning we have an incident. We see an alert that this IP address actually was used from that point. And we have feeds, and we see that there are two enemies. And feeds not always contain data about what the enemy is about. And okay, we launch an alert and we start our investigation. We start our investigation the right way, using F3EAD. Incident response starts collecting the data along with the SOC, what was there. So, for instance, we're collecting logs, artifacts, so all the forensic data, everything in the CM system. And probably there was no audit at all, probably. Even the event was not launched. That would be a very regrettable thing. And we also have the entry point. We know that this entry point used this IP address. In terms of the incident response, we start fix phase, and exploit stage starts from the other site and we start investigation. IP, actually, what information we get from the IP information? A lot of data. If you have certain TI portals, what kind of an IP it is, when it emerged, its type, timelines, when it was green, when it was red, and probably it has always been gray. But most importantly, it would give you information about certain files pertaining to that IP address. The files actually would turn to the IP and vice versa. You can get a lot of very interesting information while IT response and SOC team are doing that. Actually, they're losing time. You have certain hash pertaining to that IP address. And we even have the names of detects, when they were detected. And we upload that data and would render that information to the incident response so that they start scanning the infrastructure.
So they start digging into this and maybe they will find something if you're lucky. So we tend to be lucky because we do the right thing. So we find the first hash. So the hash is in the same machine and we send this intelligence to the incident response team so that they scan this infrastructure and that infrastructure to see whether there is a foothold anywhere else. So we have the body of the file. We can reverse it, send it to the sandbox, and get some intelligence from it. Okay, so what do? We send our file to the sandbox, and there we understand what kind of file it is. So it is launched by run.dll, a library. Then run.dll launches a service. And then the service is launched into this register key. So it is fixed there. Then it is launched with a standard service name, which is not listed in Windows. It gets a foothold through this name. So if this is through run.dll with the random name, then you should brace yourself. Okay, this is not very good. Okay, so we had this with the machine. It is connecting to this IP address. So now we start attribution. So we have 88% in our case. So MRTAT. So we believe that this is MRTAT, but we are still making progress. Okay, what else can we have a look at? Let's talk about the hash. There is a lot of information. The URLs, IPs, domains, email addresses, and register keys, and many other things can be related to this, where it was in the company and some other data. So we have the URL, and it is related to this file. And it shows that this file was downloaded from this URL. Let's have a look. Okay, here is the URL, the same thing as with the IP. We have a category, we have the timeline, and we have data with hashes. Maybe they're there in the infrastructure. The SOC and incident response guys, they're in the CM, they send queries. So you see this issue in Lipetsk, and it is trying to get even more holes. So it is at the C2 level. So this is competent control. So what shall we do next? We are in a predicament, aren't we? So we send the data to the incident response team, and we want them to scan using the URL and the hashes. So please scan the infrastructure, and then we find another machine, and there we have one of these hashes. Okay, this incident response team disconnects it, isolates it, and gives it to us. Okay, now we have a kind of a branch. So, and let's have a look at the most interesting things from this interesting branch. Okay, we squeeze it into the sandbox. So we see the file type. So this is Excel. Okay, what is happening here? Number one, shell launch from Excel with some gibberish in the PowerShell. Okay, when Excel launches PowerShell, well, chances are an admin has done it, but it's negligible. Okay, then we see that PowerShell goes to some IP, another one. And now let's have a look at the PowerShell. PowerShell tells us, please go to these URLs. Please download the library. Let me try to make it visible. So download the library with a random name, send it to the app data, and please launch it through the run DLL32. Okay, let's go one slide backwards. Okay, we can see the connection. And now the incident response team can assume that this is most likely to be phishing. So if you look at the document, so maybe it went inside the perimeter. So we can attribute this to the adversary. So we understand what it started with. So we have an IP address. The IP address went there. We found hashes. The hashes were from the same machine. Then we went to the URL. From the URL, we jumped to scanning the hashes, and they found another machine which most probably had spam. So it has a document attributed to commented. So you can find a lot of stuff in the internet there from your platforms and your portals. And that will say a few words about the techniques and tactics, the latest campaigns. If you are a bank in Egypt, for instance, maybe they cracked a bank in Algeria. So you understand where, when, and how. So TI has supported you. So now you're ready for action. So now you understand that you have scanned everything. You don't have anything else. We know that phishing data was used, so we know that this is a imited group, and we know that this is clean, this is one is clean, there is nothing else there, no one is trying to get inside, so we have scanned everything using our intelligence. Only after that, you are in the track zone and you can start eradicating, you are squeezing the adversary out. So the incident response team have done their work. They will talk to the IT guys, so they will clean the stuff and maybe reinstall things. So, but you don't stop there, because this is an aggressive approach. So TI is digging deeper, looking for some other intelligence. So they tell the SOC, Sigma, Surkat, Yara, all of this based on the incident. They Google the Ematet in the internet. So they try to unearth whatever they can to protect themselves from this Ematet. And then they send all this to SOC. So the guys should be prepared. So we need to understand these mistakes deeply. And this interaction is a strong thing. When TI and incident response work together, it is mutually beneficial, and it is about cross-pollination and many other things. Okay, there is another movie, Ender's Game. You know, I really enjoyed it. And the teacher would always tell the student that the only teacher is your enemy, and the enemy is our best teacher. If we learn from our adversaries, our enemies, then we'll give them, well, a lesser chance. So that's why TI is a very good concept to deal with. Thank you. Okay, may you be strong and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. You can scan this QR code for the merge, so you can play a test. My TI guys prepare the test, so if you succeed in it, you will get some merge. Hello, here I am to the right, further to the right. Hello, everyone. So you mentioned at the beginning of your speech that you pick relevant PTTs for a given organization. And do you think there is any understanding of the way you can automate this process? To automate the process, no way. Well, I mean, TI, well, you know, building a threat landscape is not about automation. You can automate data collection. So do you mean that you're not doing it at all because it is a dead end? Well, I'm not advertising, but well, there are some concepts showing that you can use intelligence, and this can be used by the vendor to tell you, okay, I'm a bank in Egypt, I'm sitting there, and they're building campaigns for you, and so on. Well, some people will offer this winter. Okay, great. And for the PTM box, recently it was piloted. And we know that there are some functions analyzing links. Well, you understand what I'm talking about. And unfortunately, if there are links to shared services like Yandex Disk and Nextcloud, the file wouldn't get downloaded. So and if it is protected by a password, well, that's clear. So maybe from the file sharing systems it should download. Well, I cannot mention anything about this sandbox, but the standard sandboxes, they usually have this function, yeah, with a specific file, yeah, but usually they just give you the links to the file sharing service where you need to press the download button and then they file it. So if you have a good clicker in the sandbox, well, I hope the sandbox will have it. Are you developing this? Well, I would like to use your product and to have these functions in it. Okay, I represent Kaspersky. I don't know about the sandbox. I think you used PTCN sandbox. No, it was ours. Okay, sorry, my mistake. Hello, I have a question. Hello, I can see you now. I have this one. Well, not exactly a question. It will be a tricky question. You talked about preventing eradication from the outset, so you should get information and prepare for the stage. Okay, why cannot you respond, say, if you talk about disrupting network connectivity? I have seen some botnets, and many of them, and the most important thing is to disconnect them from the management system. So if we disrupt the network connectivity of the botnet, it is helpless because it can do nothing without the host if it doesn't have a logic in it. So could you please show the latest slide? Okay, they have taken the clicker away from me. Okay. Response and eradication are two distinctive things. So you can kill a botnet. Okay, you have killed a botnet, but there is another IP there saying go there again in 1 day or in a year. So it can do this if you don't find the file. So in TI you have the information about the kill chain, and there, yeah, by the way, when you do forensics about a botnet, you can identify the IPs it goes to, but if it is a bespoke one, a fresh one, okay, if it is bespoke and fresh, well, if I reverse it, I will find the IP. Okay, and if you could show the slide with the computers, yeah, this one. Let me answer my own question, if I may, quite quickly. Okay, a botnet. It can be really sophisticated, and it can have another type of connectivity, like computer A, so in the middle, the one we eradicated, yeah, the one which was infected, yeah, this one in the middle. It can be connected to another infrastructure, indeed, and that infrastructure can talk to a botnet only through this computer using SMB, and in this case, only when we eradicate this computer, the main one, the other ones will take on this connectivity and they will start connecting with another CNC using some other connectivity. That's why you cannot do this until you have identified the whole kill chain and eradicated the whole botnet. Yeah, indeed, this is a case-by-case question. You can be lucky. So I'm just describing you the approach. But when you kill a botnet, you show the adversary that they have been discovered. And this is not very nice, on one hand. Well, about your case, when you see this connectivity, when they go there, you kill this one, then the others will run. Well, but this is an individual case, I would say. But I think it's better to have a look at the file, have a look at the conflict, and then you kill it, because you don't know what to have this. But you should reveal yourself to the adversary at the last moment when you are 100% sure that they will not come back. Otherwise, it's quite dangerous. Hello, another question. Thank you for your speech. I've got two questions. Is Gossopka still important? Which one? Is Gossopka still important? Do you have any interaction with it in terms of TI? And the other one, how do you find TTPs or feeds in darknet? So, who does it? Okay, in the Kaspersky lab, we do engage with Gossopka. In the darknet, we have a dedicated team looking through the darknet for some things. Okay, you say, I'm a bank in Egypt, so they are looking things for you, whether you are mentioned in a forum or whether they are preparing something for you. But usually you can find some samples there, but you will not find some fresh things they are trying to sell for $5,000. So we are monitoring this. So we have some credentials imitating the activity and gathering information. So this is one of the sources, one of many. And what about Gossopka? Well, yeah, I know that we are in touch. Okay, thank you. You're welcome. Hello, another question. Thank you for your speech. I really enjoyed following your speech, and based on what you have described, I have a question. How does it match the real life of SOCs in Russia? Because the commercial SOCs in Russia have this idea of SLA, and all these actions you have described are going to take more than an hour, to put it mildly, and the in-house ones, well, to have a team, a TI team, is extremely expensive. And considering the number of cybersecurity experts, this is an uphill job. So how can we try to apply it to our environment? Okay, cybersec is expensive, SOCs are expensive, and TIs are even more expensive. Okay, the best TI analysts can be the product of second, third line guys. So you usually don't have time for TI. You have artifacts and logs. You will not have enough time for this. So you need someone. You need an aid. So the book about the strike zone describes the team of incident response. You should have a SOC analyst. You should have a lawyer to tell the public something if they say that you've been cracked. The top management, the TI analyst, an IT guy for the incident response. So you don't run there to the IT team asking someone for help. No, you should have this guy available. And if the processes are well established, and if you have a TI platform or a TI portal, why not? Well, it is not cheap, but TI cannot be cheap. Well, gathering or collecting artifacts, well, yesterday, for instance, it took me 3 days to see whether there is a file on a machine. Well, indeed, if you have all these cycles working, so if you have the incident response, and if they are not wasting time, so they will have a one-button artifact collection if you give them a hash. But if you haven't been prepared, then, well, it's up to you. You should get ready. If you don't get ready, then it will be even more expensive. Okay, thank you. Hello, here I am. So maybe you have some groups or regions which are most difficult in terms of collecting data about them. So I didn't quite get it. I mean, which groups are the most difficult for data gathering and attribution? Okay, it's most difficult to do TTPs if it is a completely new group. So they have published an article like Bulnov cracked New Zealand, and there are 2 hashes in the indicator, and that's it. And you know that then they will publish the data. So they say we have cracked this, and so they're demanding ransom. So this is the most difficult thing, to get information about the techniques. Well, you know, TI, well, the way I see it, in TI, those will win who have more telemetrics. If the vendors has the telemetrics in New Zealand and they could grab the hash from the incident and they can understand that it's related to this group, so they'll be the first one to have the TI data, so they will win. But if you are an average organization, like making, say, clothes, and you don't have any cybersecurity data, well, but if it is an old group like ATP 41, so we have a lot of information in the web. Okay, unless we have any other questions. Okay, the guy about botnet, are you there? The guy with the botnet has left us. Okay, then you two. Which one do you prefer? The white one? The black one? And I have 2 more from the Kaspersky lab. And there was a guy in the middle of the audience. Please raise your hand. Okay, the guy with the botnet. Then you get the Kaspersky T-shirt. Okay, thank you. May you be strong and